Welcome to Corporate Cafecito,
a Latin and business podcast where we share insights and strategies to help entrepreneurs and professionals thrive.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suárez Gas.
Y yo soy Carlos Butler Vale. Bienvenidos.
Today, we're having like a true family-style cafecito here at corporate headquarters in Cicero, Illinois. And we invited some of our friends from the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus Foundation. So,
Right. This is a good time to take a sip of coffee, right? Yeah.
What is a caucus? First, you know what? Answer my question and then tell us about yourself.
Who are you? And then we'll go. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I should introduce myself, right?
Yes.
So, Oswaldo Álvarez, Executive Director with the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus Foundation. And yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Margarita Olmos, the Policy Advisor with the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
And I guess, and I think that's a very good question because my mom always asks me, what is a caucus? And I'm always finding a very hard time in translating the word into Spanish because we don't really...
Caucus.
Caucus, right? So that's why I'm very happy that you asked that question because you know here in our system, you know, we have such a thing where we have people who are legislators, elected officials, who group themselves based on a specific issue area or based on a specific population that together they represent or that together they care about, and that together the hope is that they can move as a collaborative, if you will, so to be able to make decision making and stuff like that.
You just think about like everything we're going through right now that's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're basically working with a bunch of people trying to figure out what their interests are. And a common cause, and then hopefully get them all to agree on a path forward.
Yeah, so pretty much exactly. So pretty much, I think it's really. I mean, once we define what the umbrella is, what the Latino umbrella is,
sure.
A lot of our work is really giving color to that umbrella and giving it direction and giving it what it is, right? And I think that so that's what we do. And honestly, I mean, it's been really exciting this last 2.5 years. So
do you have to be Latino to participate in this foundation?
So to participate in the foundation, no. I mean, anyone can participate in the foundation, but to be part of the caucus, yes.
Uh-huh.
So 24 years ago, when the caucus was established, founded, it was with any Latino majority districts. And about 4 years ago, the caucus did move so that it became where we were able to then 24 years later, right? We were able to have such a large Latino number that at that point it was no longer needed. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
To be able to have, you know, so that's kind of where we are. So that's why it was 4 years ago the caucus shifted, and now it's just Latinos. Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about because I know and I got introduced to you by Maggie.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Okay.
Maggie's fine. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So tell us a little bit about your staff even, right? Because this sounds like quite a major operation. Yeah, it sounds like a major operation. So obviously you're part of the team, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But how does your organization actually do the work of getting these people aligned and then go out and try to get them all moving in that same direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, so I think it's all about identifying what's our common North Star, if I'm being honest. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, it's like, and this is where we're all humans, right? And we all have our different paths, and we get to different spaces in different ways.
Sure.
But if I can identify what's the North Star that all four of us have in common, and if I can do that, then all of a sudden everyone's going to be able to have trust in that that's what we're working towards too. Even if we're fighting. you know what I mean?
Well, I think, like we have Latins that vote on both sides of the fence, but I think we all agree that we want to educate our next generation.
Yeah,
like,
that's
is that
right.
something that
there you go. That's there you go. I think that's and you know, and this question always reminds me. This question always reminds me of, like, I always remember when I was getting interviewed for the job, right? And I always remember that one of the senators asked me, Oswaldo, give it to me straight. What do you want this job, right? And I always remember that I told her, I was like, listen, I'm like, I grew up with 3 sisters. I'm like, my mom, my dad passed away. I'm like, and my 3 sisters are very different. One, I grew up in the north side, Logan Square, Central Park and Fullerton. You know, that's my corner. Don't come for it. And you know, and where I grew up, you know, really, one of my sisters, she's really like, you know, the lip liner, the hoop stuff. She was the one protecting me. She was the one I was about to get a fight. Hey, Liz, can you help me out, right?
Yeah.
The other sister, I mean, she swears we're from Spain or something, right? She's like, you know, we are bougie, we are this, we are that. I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, that's one sister.
Sure.
The other one, very, what's it called? She's, you know, I think she's more humble, more, you know, all of these things and whatever. She cooks a lot, great, right? And at the end of the day, those are all my sisters. At the end of the day, we are allowed to size each other up and down whenever we want, but you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to make sure that our Latino community is. That our Latino community, we are so many different, in our own family, we are so many different colors.
Sure.
We are so many different things. And at the end of the day, and I know that we're going to be like, I don't like that about you, but you're still my, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the point that I'm making is that was my answer in that interview. And I think that from there, they saw what I'm trying to do.
We talk, I mean, I think that resonates a lot with what we talk about, you know, just that family component that we even bring to our workplaces, whether that be in a nonprofit environment or in a for-profit environment. And so that makes sense. At the end of the day, you know, you want, you know, I think you mentioned education. You know, one of the things obviously that I think also rings true to me is entrepreneurship or career mobility, home ownership, right? You know, these kinds of things that obviously impact communities, which then brings me to you, Maggie, hopefully a little bit, because, you know, you are advising on policy, right? And so would love to hear a little bit more about your role and how that influences some of the work that we have in front of us, and then obviously more largely just the corporate spaces.
Yeah, so within the foundation, you know, Oswaldo had a vision of, you know, what he could foresee and how we could continue supporting the community. And one of those ways was, for example, existing programs and existing policy and what can we do with existing policy to be able to further support the community. And so through this, you know, he reached out to one of the organizations that works very closely with state government employees. And through that, he was able to find what he was looking for and be able to support that. And so what we're currently doing right now is we're looking at and assessing and reviewing existing policy and seeing how sometimes there's not enough awareness in our community that these programs already exist. And so a lot of the times what we hear...
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I remember like, and you know, now we have the internet, but when I was a little girl, we didn't, and you would just find out like, well, where'd you get that? And they'd be like, oh, si vas acá y les dices esto, and you'd be like, oh, okay, but I mean, just like basic things.
Or
like,
you play the telephone game too, you know, like in that process, whereas now, to your point, you can get it straight. And what I love about this is you're not reinventing the wheel.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if I may say, like, I mean, I think that this all started from us trying to identify already what was there, and but also this is the thing that we are with the legislative Latino Caucus, right? And in the system of government, there is the checks and balances.
Yes.
And the whole idea is that the legislative branch, which in this case my Latino Caucus belongs to, can have an oversight in terms of what's actually happening at the executive branch where all the money is at.
Yes.
And so the thing is that when we started this job, we didn't realize, for example, and I keep on saying this, and I'm hoping it's not that bad once it's not later, right? But for me, I always feel like I didn't realize that the emperor has no clothes. And what I mean by that is that I didn't realize, for example, that when you become a Latino legislator, let's suppose that you become a Latino legislator right now.
Oh, nice job.
I know, right?
Thank
No,
you.
really, let's say that
Thank
you're a
you.
state senator.
Is that all it took?
I mean, yeah. And let's say that, you know, your issue was education, and education's the issue, and you got voters, and everyone voted for you.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Tomorrow you're going to be in front of a appropriations meeting. They're going to talk about emission tests and how much money that is, and blah blah blah. And you have to make a decision. on that, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? Your job came with not really a big budget for you to hire people to
Sure.
really give you the information.
Yeah.
And so what we've been able to do
I was
here.
just about to ask you, like, how would he even know about that?
Right.
Yeah.
How would he know? He has to ask nonprofits. He has to ask people he knows.
Sure.
That's the way for him to get the information. But the thing is that it's not information that is internal without any kind of agenda, if that makes sense. He does not have that real kind of access. That's what I mean that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah, so it can be just information. I mean, the existence of information alone isn't necessarily the thing that's going to move it forward. It's how are you empowering, how are you sharing that information with others,
and then we're all reading the same information.
Right, establishing common language.
That's right. And,
yeah.
And let me tell you, the work that we're doing here, is not, we're not pushing for one way or another. Like what we end up doing with the work that Maggie is doing is something like this, for example. Let's suppose you're about to walk into that meeting, and let's say it's the Department of Transportation, right? I'm going to tell you, hey, so last year they were required to spend 30% of their money on what's it called on BEP, and that means minority business or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Of that 30%, 47% they spent it, so they did good. Out of that 47%, 0 went to Latinos. Here you go. And I'll do the same to you. Yo ya no dije nada. You do what you need to do. Go into the meeting. You walk into the meeting, you're gonna be like, ha.
As your legislator, I would have a problem with that.
But you see what I'm saying? But that's, well, I mean, we'll get to that. But that's what this is. That's exactly what I do.
Let's talk about this.
Okay.
So this is the Raíces 2025 report. You can see it has the beautiful school right here, UIC.
That's right.
Which is where I went to school. So this is like, I would say like the Bible, but my mom would be like, esa no es la Biblia.
Yeah.
We'll call it a guide.
It's a very important guide.
There you go.
Okay, so I just started like going through this, and it is amazing what's in there. It's not only like where we live, what we spend, like what is the short version of what's in here, and also like how do we use it?
Yes. Okay, the short version is that it is a snapshot of who and what Latinos are doing in the state of Illinois. And we go from education to environmental justice to immigration to workforce development to GDP, you name it. So like if you're looking for any number that has to do with Latinos and Illinois, it even has the breakdown of Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Ecuador. If you're looking for any number that has to do with Latinos in Illinois, this is the report for you. Any number.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm looking through, and you have an entire section called The Power Latinos Have.
That's right.
and you're doing such a great job. I mean, like literally you brought my eye to the fact that if not for Latinos, that I'm quoting here, Illinois would lose more than $100 billion contribution to its GDP.
That's right. And if you notice that was the last year that we had full access to information was 2021. So that number that you have
It's bigger.
Not only that, that was the COVID year.
Wow.
I'm just giving you the number. You saw that? That's the COVID year.
See?
It's not even you know what I mean?
See, you're selling me already.
That's the part about that for me and for us, what's very important is for us to highlight all of the power that we bring into the state and how Latinos, honestly, we have saved the state in so many different ways. It was funny. We were asking the question if it were not for Latinos at our conference, because we have a public policy conference. We asked people, how did they feel about these things? And it was funny. We were asking people, so if it were not for Latinos, Illinois would be, and people would be like, Nebraska.
Come on, you didn't even give them a multiple choice.
I know, we would just give them people. But what was funny is that once people will give us that answer, our job through the researchers with Great Cities Institute was let's go deeper into that answer. Yeah. What do they mean by Nebraska?
Yeah.
Really, what do you mean by? And then the more deeper we went, the more we were like, that's right. And let me tell you, Great Cities Institute has been amazing. They even did a part of the report, another report that they did was one where they were looking at Latino migration to Chicago, right? And it was interesting. They were looking at what were the major cities in the U.S. in the 1950s. And then they looked at Latino migration, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 90s, 2000. And it was interesting to see that those that were the largest cities in 1950s and did not have good Latino migration went down, and those that had great Latino migration became global hubs.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
I mean, global hubs. And we're talking LA, San Diego, New York, Chicago. I mean, whereas Milwaukee and St. Louis were once up there.
Yeah.
And just to give you
Yeah,
behind
absolutely.
what Nebraska was. You know what I mean? Sorry, Nebraska. Love you
Yeah.
guys. Love Omaha. Love
No,
Omaha.
yeah. We have listeners surely in
That's right.
Nebraska.
I got cousins in
We do
Omaha.
love
Okay?
Nebraska. So, Maggie, there's a lot of changes happening right now. Obviously, both on a federal level that could impact the state level. We have a lot of folks that listen that are entrepreneurs, that are leaders in businesses in Illinois, global companies that are headquartered in Illinois, and they're trying to figure out what's next. So, how does what's happening right now factor into a lot of the work that you're doing from a policy perspective that could potentially influence some of our listeners in terms of their jobs, their livelihood, or and the like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now. However, I think part of the priority that we have at the foundation is to be data driven. And so through the data, the data is able to portray a picture of, what's been happening in the past and what could it tell us for the future. And I think in Illinois, through our legislators and, a lot of organizations, we're striving to continue at least not feel as many changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, one of the events that we have coming up is where we convene with a lot of the nonprofits, community stakeholders, basically the community at large in regards to like Latino affairs. And we're able to discuss a lot of these policies and how they're going to change. And so I think, we're going to continue looking at the data. And I think the data will tell us, what we can do.
Is there like a red, like, do you guys pick up the phone and you're like, get Nebraska on the line, and you're like, and then there's like
Nebraska's getting a lot of love today.
I know,
and Oswaldo and Margarita in Nebraska doing the same work, or do you find that this is mostly concentrated where we have a big Latino presence?
Well, I mean, I would say that, honestly, this is where I feel like my background is not in government. I mean, kind of in government with the census, right? But before that, it was in the private sector, philanthropy, nonprofit. Well, I did.
The census was run by a Latino up until recently.
The census that was. In Illinois that was me.
No.
I know in the
Yeah.
nation,
Nationally,
right?
yeah.
So actually, yeah.
Latino,
So before that.
So yes and yes.
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 So before that.
Aquí,
Actually, that's how I was working. Anyway, so what I was gonna say is that wait, hold on, you just made me lose my train of thought.
I was saying, do you have friends in other states doing the same work?
So the answer is not necessarily, and I say this in that organizations like ours do exist, like in California, in New York, in Texas, what have you. But the whole idea of public policy, I feel like has been usually people do public policy, companies, nonprofits, what have you. They do it because they're advocating or they're lobbying for an issue, and then from there they equip themselves with research, with all of this, so that they can be smarter in their issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our case, we're not lobbying or advocating anything. If anything, we're the factory inside of the Latino Caucus. So once it comes to us, we build it. If that makes sense. And so what we have, if you will, we have these tools for Latino elected officials to be smarter as they're making their case, if you will.
Love it.
But it is our internal factory. It's not an outside nonprofit giving it to them, right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Okay, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Like in here, we in the Raíces 2025, pick up your copy.
That's right.
So in there, we talk about the power of our community, but we also talk about things about like our disabilities and lack of insurance and things like that. Like when I read that, it makes me mad, right? And my mom is disabled, and so I'm like, man, but there's so many other people's moms who are also disabled. Like how do we find support for them, or like how do we connect the dots to say I have this information now you just made me mad.
Yeah.
Like how do I work on to fix
Sorry.
it?
So you're saying within the Latino community, looking at kind of those intersectionalities, for example,
no, what
or
I'm saying is if I have this information,
yeah.
how do I find out who's gonna help? Like Who's gonna vote?
Yeah.
So if I may,
Uh-huh.
so for example,
Yeah.
so
Like,
this
Uh-huh.
is
you
Uh-huh.
getting
Yeah.
yes. So unfortunately, as you know,
And I like
there's
to give a macro answer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So unfortunately, as you know, there's not a lot of literature or a lot of awareness of some of these programs that already exist. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that we're doing is we're equipping the legislators so that they can have this information saying, for example, we developed like a question stating that, you know, they don't have any literature in Spanish on their website. And so through that, we let them know that there is a lack of communication with different communities, this example, our Latino communities. And so they're able to say for a fact, you know, we looked at the website, we did not see any Spanish literature. How are you going to address that? Or when can we expect for you to provide, you know, accessibility, language access? And so these are some of the ways in which we're looking at some of the, if you will, gaps
Sure.
that exist between the programs that already exist and the lack of outreach done to the communities.
Yeah.
So the advocacy is on the access to the information rather than necessarily for a particular cause or
Well,
something along those lines.
in this example,
Yeah,
But,
right.
I mean, but here goes my macro example. My macro
Bring it.
thing. Yeah. Oh yeah.
You-
Oh
you-
yeah.
you- you-
I
Yeah,
know, this
he
is-
had it.
No, I got 3 other cards. What I was gonna say is that when I did census, right? So I was the director of the census, right, for the state of Illinois, right before this job, right? And I am very proud to say that, you know, the Illinois, we had the highest self-response rate of any state with over 9 million people.
Nice.
So we beat
Great.
California, Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, New York.
Just
That's right.
kidding.
No, really. We were so number one that it forced the state to create a second Latino congressional district.
I
that's
so-
right. That's
I
right.
saw that in the news.
Uh-huh.
But now, before you can do that, you
Yeah.
have to explain what a Latino congressional district is.
I mean, it's like so the entire maps, right, are divided, right, and the maps they're like drawn to represent specific communities. If we don't have a good census count, right, and let's say that we have that even though 100 people live here, but we only were able to count 40, then we're not going to be able to draw an entire map for those 100 people, what
Sure.
have you it is, right? And so then what ends up happening with congressional is that, let's say that it was, of that 100, it was 40. In many other states, right, it breaks up the 20 and 20, and then 20 go into this, 20 goes into this, and then we end up with no Latino districts.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That 20 just got split, right?
Yeah.
And so here in Illinois, we were able to do such a good number that I'm telling you, we were the only state that created another Latino district. Like,
That's
it was forced to
fantastic.
create a Latino district, right?
Which is
But-
crazy when you think of the population growth we bring and the number of people that
That's
we
right.
have. Like,
But
we
let me
should
tell
have
you,
them everywhere.
I was gonna tell you, but let me tell you what my biggest learning was, right? Because the census is like the one job that you're forced to look at everyone, like
Mhm.
100% of people, like not just the youth, not just the insurance, not everyone, right?
Mhm.
And so the thing about that was that for me, it forced me to look at the sleeping giant that Latinos are.
Mhm.
And what was interesting with the sleeping giant who Latinos are is for me to see how many Latinos, Mexican, Puerto Rican, you name it, how many of us work off the grid.
Yeah.
And by saying we work off, I'm talking from the DJ to the mechanic to the hairstylist to the unit to selling Avon. I mean, I really mean it, like working
Sure.
off the grid. And what I realized about working off the grid is that once you go around the system, you're circumventing one system, you start circumventing different systems.
Mhm.
To the point that you're not filling out a census, to the point that you're not necessarily voting. And for me, this is my macro thing, that I feel like we are so many of us that the system actually could belong to us. We just haven't figured out how to grab it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because
Yeah.
obviously I think being corporate cafecito and being who we are, I love to hear that. But there are obviously, given the current environment, a lot of folks who hear that
Yeah.
and get a little scared,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But there's what I love about this report is that there are real numbers tied to real outcomes, right?
That's right.
And so when we talk about some of these outcomes, you talk about the $100 billion back in 2021.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how maybe businesses are using some of this information to either decide, do I put a hub here? Do I maybe, because there are real business decisions that are made out of this, right? So talk to us a little bit about, and you don't have to name it necessarily any names, but like But I think it would be really great for our listeners to see how it is that we bring the legislative and then the business, because you've talked about the legislative and community.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about how that influences and impacts business.
I think that. Okay, so of course, we all get really excited when we see our report getting cited on social media. We're like, oh my God, they're using our yeah. Especially when you see like other
You're
companies.
Ma, look, esto es lo que hago.
Yeah. And my mom like, trust me, my mom is like, I don't get it. That's okay. But that's okay.
You're like, as long as you're counted, we're good.
Yeah, exactly. And but I will say that so for us, we get really excited when we see even our sponsors, our corporate. And just for you to know, like over 90% of our sponsorship is corporate, right? So for us to see our partners using our data, using our numbers as they're making decisions, for us that's very exciting, right? And then also when it comes to like, for example, I was just in the trade mission in Mexico, right, with the state of Illinois, right? And we were there with the American Embassy. And one of the big questions there was because of everything that's going on at the international level, I should say, right? Yeah. They were like scared of all of these different companies that, they might leave or what have you, Mexico and stuff like that and whatever. And I actually went into this report deep. In Illinois, we have 1.8 million people who identify as Mexican American. Just in 2021, again, the year of COVID, Latino businesses in Illinois generated $4.1 billion. I'm like, but let me say this.
4.1 billion.
No, más en Illinois. En Illinois. Now,
Con B de burro.
Con B de burro, sí. No estamos tan burros, right? And so, and what I told them was this. I was like, as Latinos, we already are born with a global identity. We speak like 2 languages. ¿Qué más diéramos to be able to put my business in Mexico too? Or in Puerto Rico? That's the dream, actually.
Right.
Yeah. But guess what? We don't have access to these systems that you guys are building. I'm like, imagine if you had the 1.8 million Mexicans, not even Latino, Mexicans, with all of that business going into Mexico. If 2 or 3 drop, we're not breaking the system anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But right now, because we're not looking at them, we're only looking at these 10. Of course, it's gonna break the system if 2 leave.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And that's the part that for me, it excites me, right? That for me, I'm just like, now that we have this, we can really use this as ammunition.
We can quantify it.
And we can use this as ammunition to make our case, right? Into all of the different things. Anyway, so just wanted to say that.
No,
Sorry.
listen, that's amazing.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed a lot is there's a lot of people interested in real estate in Mexico now.
Yeah.
And vamos a tener casa allá, casa acá.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point that I'm like, let's do it. Like, I'm not saying, for me, I feel like, and now that we have enough in Illinois, 17 let's rewrite the rule book if the problem is the rule book.
I love it,
you know what I mean? If the problem is the rule book, let's change it, ¿verdad? Y es lo que digo de que that's what Maggie and I are doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I also think like you brought up something when we have businesses here, but we don't have businesses there. I couldn't tell you the first thing about starting a business in Mexico.
Yeah.
That's a great point, yeah.
But guess what? General Motors is in Mexico. I'm sure they had an idea. That's the point. That's kind of the criticism I'm making. Not against General Motors. My point is I get it. That's one big company that we want over there. But imagine if we had 1.8 million little companies.
Yeah.
Imagine. A ese punto.
That are not off the grid.
That are
not off the grid.
Or we write the book so that the grid is not the problem.
Yeah.
You see what I'm trying to say? That's
We-
the point.
we do.
I think what when we talk about like the off the grid, I remember the first time, and this is when I felt like I had made it when I got called in to work at my dad's bar, and he was like, "Vente, like I'll give you $60," and I was like, I'm gonna sit today out. And he's like, oh, you no ocupa dinero. But I was like, man, this is the first time I've turned down cash money to get a Friday night off. But I think that, when...
Cost benefit.
You
were like,
my
Friday's
worth more.
Because that's the life of an entrepreneurial family, right?
Yeah.
Me ayudas, te vienes, and whatever. And I had told my dad, like, once I got my full-time job, I was like, I don't work for free anymore.
Yeah,
I love
He's
it.
like, oh, you're
Look at you. You're like, mija, ya estás muy grande.
Yeah. But I think that that's how our community is, and I don't think it's intentional to be off the grid. It's just it's a thing.
That's my point.
Yeah, we're all like,
No, that's my point.
yeah.
That it's not, and we all feel like we have to then go in hiding.
Yeah.
And that's my.
Well,
that,
I mean, and look at what's happening now. I
Yeah.
mean, and
Yeah.
that's all a little scary.
It is.
You know,
Yeah,
and,
it is.
and it makes people. Yeah, I mean, and I think what you're talking about, you know, and not to get too political, but there's a little bit of a lack of trust to.
Mhm.
It could feel, you know, too complicated, which is what I love about what you guys are talking about, which is kind of making sure that people are getting the information and they're distilling, and that you're distilling however possible, so that it is usable
Yeah, that's right.
for more than just one group of people.
That's right. That's right.
And you know, something you said to me which really stood out, what you just said to us, was that over 90% of your sponsors are corporate.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because that I think that's a fascinating number.
I mean, so because we are the Latino Caucus Foundation, and even though we are a nonprofit 501c3, the same as many other coalitions, chambers, what have you, are formed, right? We have made a very deliberate decision that we are not going to go for any government dollars ourselves, because it could be seen as a conflict of interest, right? That the legislators are putting a bill, the
Yeah.
next thing you know, it has the money, and the next thing their own internal organization, right? So we do not take any of those dollars, right? And then the other part of it is that we wanted to make sure that the organization that we build is an organization that belongs to us, right? And so for that, we needed to be able to have complete flexibility with the money that we get, so that we can form programs that are just doing this kind of work, right? So that's
I'm
all
actually
that
really
happened.
glad I asked that question, because
Yeah.
I love that answer. The fact that you want to maintain a level of independence, so that whatever the data shows
Is the
Yeah.
data.
is the data.
Yeah.
And again, you're thinking about this, you know, multiple sort of concentric circles
Yeah,
too.
and then let me say, when I started, you know, we were a $300,000 organization. Half of that budget came from one company, a $150,000 grant. And I was like, oh my God, if we lose the grant, I lose my job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, I mean, honestly, and then 2.5 years later, we're now almost 1.7 million.
Congrats, that's amazing.
And a lot of $5,000 and $10,000 grants. And guess what? That $150,000 grant did go down to $100,000. And guess what? It did not break us.
Wow.
So that's
'Cause
that.
you were prepared.
And that's the point I'm making, right? And so the point that I'm even making, even
Hombre prevenido vale
no,
por dos.
no, but like I really meant it. Like when I went to
Yeah.
Mexico and I was giving this, right? That I'm not, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it won't break you. I won't
Yeah.
at that point. You know what I mean? And
I
now
love it.
You're your own. So.
Maggie, what is? We're getting close to time, so I want to, you know, just I'm curious now, because Oswaldo, you have a lot of energy, which I absolutely love. We've given you, I don't know what we gave him
Yeah, look
in
at that,
the
I finished
cafecito, but I love it.
Okay.
And I could feel it when we were talking in the pre session. But Maggie, I'm gonna ask the question for both of you. But what's one thing you're really proud of the work that you've been doing?
Ooh, that's tough. But I would say I think the highlight of the importance of the data.
Okay.
Because I think you know, we feel certain things based on what we hear, what we see, but the data really speaks for itself. And so when we were able to provide the data, not only for our legislators but for our community through the Raíces report and other avenues, I think we're able to provide that comfort level to our community that we are really looking out for them. We're trying to support them, and that we're making sure that we're looking at it from a quantitative standpoint, and also you know, we got the receipts in a sense, right?
Love
So
that.
yeah.
We got the receipts.
We got receipts.
Oswaldo, how about you?
I mean, I feel like Maggie just said it all, right? But what do I feel most proud of? You know, I think how I started, that, you know, that this is a Latino house, right? And yeah, there might be dirty laundry inside the house, but outside, las plantas, las flores, is beautiful house.
Yeah.
Okay?
I
So
love
when
that.
people look at us, they're gonna be like, that's the house I want to be at.
I love that.
Mhm.
And
So,
go ahead.
okay, where can we find this?
Yeah.
You can,
Like, don't come to my house. You're not giving my copy.
Yeah, well, this is
Where
ours.
can we find this?
yeah, I mean, you can find it at our website.
Okay.
It's a mouthful. ILLCfoundation.org.
And don't worry, we'll link to it as
Yeah.
well. So
Okay. I was like,
folks don't have to worry about typing it in.
I
Don't
was like, I
worry.
can go in
We
Spanish.
got you. We got you.
Punto com.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you can go into our policy page, and then there you'll be able to find it. And then you'll be able to find the reports from the previous years also.
So website, policy page,
Yeah.
2025, and
Yeah.
then previous years
And
as
then
well.
previous years are there.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Oswaldo, Margarita, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work you're doing to make sure that we're represented, that our voices get heard, that policies get pushed. You know, like it feels like, you know, sometimes you just see things happen and you don't know why they happened or who was behind it. And I think having you guys as that army behind this, making us seen, being that voice for so many of us here. And, you know, when we see that change in Illinois, hopefully it'll also trigger change in other states and,
Yes.
you know, the awareness. So I love that you put this together. I think it's full of great wins. I think
Yeah.
it's full of really sad realizations. But it is full of awareness and things that we need to know so that we could better our community. And, you know, I love what you're saying, like, la ropa sucia se lava en casa, but when we go out, we are a united front and we and vote.
And I can't stress enough the voting. Like even when we look at the numbers of people who voted and how they voted, I always say of those who voted.
Yeah.
Of those who voted.
We
that's
don't
true.
know those who don't voted.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what I want.
Yeah.
For people to vote. For
Yes.
everyone. See what explico?
Yes.
Like that's why I'm just like that's why as you can tell we're nerds here.
You're in good company. You're in good company. Well,
Yeah.
and to that point, you know, one of the things that I will say, you know, just looking at the report for all of our Corporate Cafecito listeners, there's a lot of information here. And one of the things that we like to do is to empower people with great, easy steps to be empowered and to take that next level. And so as you're looking through this, once we link to it, find maybe one thing, maybe two things that you're really passionate or interested about, or that are really pertinent to your business, to the company that you work for, to your role, and follow that thread. Because, you know, Osvaldo, this is a lot of information. Maggie, this is a lot, right? And maybe community development isn't necessarily where you're focused, right? Maybe it's in economic empowerment, or maybe it is in education. So take a look at this report, find a few threads, start pulling them, and then start to figure out how it is that you're gonna leverage this information, because I can tell you right now, that answering that question of if not for Latinos, right?
Yeah.
Or if it weren't for Latinos.
Such a beautiful
And
question.
for all of us, right, whether you are a senior executive or you are someone that is just starting out, that is a very critical question that you should be asking in terms of how do we market, how do we create products, how do we innovate, how do we do any of these things. So definitely make sure that you take a look. And then of course, obviously the group at the foundation, I'm sure is always happy to answer any questions or, you know, if you need to do a little bit more digging, so.
That's right.
All right. Well, aquí ya se nos acabó el capítulo.
Ya se nos acabó.
I know.
Osvaldo definitely his
I know.
coffee is done, yeah.
You know.
We welcome you back every single time. We would love to have you on more as you continue to expand. We definitely want to see the Raíces 2026.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, join us as often and, you know, use this to be a platform to megaphone the work that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Gracias.
Okay.
Gracias.
All right, well,
Okay.
aquí los esperamos la próxima vez. Yo soy Nayeli Suárez Gas.
Y yo soy Carlos Patrón. Hasta la próxima.